Fraudcast, everybody. This is a weekly session that Vito and I host to talk about all things e-commerce, fraud, and risk related. And it's a great place for you to bring kind of what you're working on, what you're thinking about, and bring that to a group of other people in the space, other very passionate folks in the space who have probably worked on a lot of things that you're working on now, or have gone through certain struggles and challenges and have conquered those things and could give you some advice. And then also just to hear what's going on with, your peers in the space. So we have a very exciting guest with us today. So Vito will intro him and everything. Really quick though, I'm going to go through some housekeeping. We are recording this session. So just a heads up there, we do share the recording with folks who aren't able to join us, so that they could get the download on everything that we talked about here. And then two, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. This is, a place where you could connect with other folks in the e-commerce fraud and risk space, and hopefully continue the conversations afterward. If you hear something that someone mentions and you're like, oh, I really would want to dive into that a little bit more, hopefully you guys could connect with one another and continue those conversations outside of this space as well. So please introduce yourself with your name, title, maybe what company you're coming from, and if you would like to, your LinkedIn to connect with other folks. And so we have an idea of who's in the room. We're not speaking with a bunch of strangers. And also, please join us on camera if you can. And if you're able to, we love seeing everybody's smiling faces. And it feels a little bit more like we're, in a conversation, rather than just seeing a bunch of floating names. So if you're able to be on camera with us, that's great. We love it. If you're not able to, that's totally fine. You can hang back and be off camera as well. There's a few different ways that you can participate during the session. You can throw any questions, comments, ideas into the chat. So that's always welcome. Or you can raise your hand, and we'll be sure to call on you. And you could just voice whatever thoughts you might have or questions. And then also, if for whatever reason you would like a question to be anonymous, there is an anonymous Q&A option in the Zoom menu that you should be able to click on and submit a question if you have one and you would like that to remain anonymous. Yeah, and those are the big things. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Vito to introduce the topic and our guest for this week's session.
What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. It's so good to see you. We have so many founding members of Fraudcast University here today. As you walk the campus, you could see their names on those hallowed halls. But I love seeing all these new faces, new names. We got Emma in the building. What up, Emma? Tomas is here. We got so many other people. It's great to see you. But you know what? Enough about me. Enough of my voice. I'm so excited today. It's a very special day, not just for the Fraudcast, but for me personally. We've got someone who probably needs almost no introduction. My voice is cracking just getting at this. Someone who needs almost no introduction, but I'll give you a quick one anyway. He is the head of fraud at Dodgeball. You have seen him on LinkedIn. You have read his newsletter. You have been learning from the man as much as I've been learning from him. I invite you all to give a snapping fingers, jazz hands, whatever you got from my friend and the main man, Brian Davis. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on. It's always hard to come after you because as soon as I met you, it's like, kid is electric. I don't really know how I'm always supposed to follow that up and carry that through and through, but I'm going to do my best today. I'm Brian Davis. I'm the head of fraud at Dodgeball. I like to think I'm in phase 2 of my career of helping build fraud teams and companies and the products to it. Phase 1, I was always the first fraud hire. My weird little thing is I like to see how different business models are abused by fraud. Weird, I know, but that's brought me from digital subscriptions, physical goods, marketplaces, fintech, being the first fraud hire, really understanding what are our fraud risks that we should care about, where we want to be, who do we want to become, the biggest of the big, what are their fraud problems, and then really kind of lay out the foundation, the teams, the tools, the rules, the policy, and making sure people understand and care about what I'm actually doing.
Love it. Love it. And I'm sure all of you already, in hearing Brian talk and kind of knowing he's here, have your questions kind of teed up. But I wanted to set the stage for us a little bit today. The theme, the kind of, center center page for us is going to be making yourself heard in fraud. We've talked about this a lot. We were talking about, the Susi School of Communications, right? And how we kind of articulate those problems that we're having internally with not only our own teams, but bringing them up to executive levels. And I really put this in two big contexts. And this is where we're going to, set the stage for today. Number one is cross-team contextualization. I don't know if you know this about Dodgeball or even about Signify, but we work on industrial lathes in order to figure out where the fraud is. We work on tools that you see here. And here's Brian and I working on such tools. As we're working together and we're at our own lathe, when I see something a little bit off or when something's a little bit wrong, sometimes I might kind of balk at saying why I don't want to tell them what's really going on because I don't know if I have all my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and I want to make sure I'm saying the right things, and I don't want to sound silly. So that's some like internal struggle we might feel about talking to our own teams about where the fire's at, where the work needs to be, what needs to get done. Bigger than that, and perhaps central to this group's thinking is this point right here, the cross-threaded contextualization. Now we've gotten out of the warehouse floor or the lathe. I don't know. I've never worked on a lathe before, guys. I'm kind of like showing my hand here. We've gotten off the floor and we're in the boardroom. You could see that, I've kind of buttoned up my shirt, I guess, in this example here. They made me a lot more, sharp than I deserve to be here. So I do apologize for that. I didn't tell the AI to make me very sharp looking, but there it is. And if you see the CEO here has kind of got like a little Scott Stapp, like a early 2000s goatee going on. I didn't ask for that either. I was very lucky to get that. But when we get in front of executives and we want to either talk about why performance is the way it is, what our teams have been working on, how we might need a little bit more budget, or maybe how we might even deserve a little bit more pay. How do we, kind of approach that? So we're calling on, in my opinion, and I think in many other people's opinions, the top voice in this realm, and that's Brian. So Brian, let's start kind of at the lathes a little bit. Let's start. We're at our desks. We're opening up the laptop. We see the dashboards on fire. We get our first orders in, and oh my God, this is what's going on. Where does your head go as to I need to put this into a story? What's the North Star of my storytelling, or how do you, it's almost like asking an author, like, where do you get your ideas from? Like what kind of ideas are you bringing into that crux when you're going to tell your team a story about what's going on that day and where that fire's at?
So there's three pillars for me, and it all kind of feeds into it. KYS, for simplicity, I'll just say know your stuff. KYA, know your audience. KYM, know your message. They all go together, but it really starts with really understanding what's happening. What am I responsible for? Why am I hired? Why do people think I'm hired? And really what I'm doing in the first place when I coming in is understanding what is our product? What are our assets? Why do people want to target us? And what do I need to protect? And do we have the right protections in place? So I'll map the customer journey to say, like, all right, someone finds whoever we may be. What are we? Or do we have physical goods? Do we have a subscription-based membership? Do we have digital subscriptions? Like, what is our business operations industry? That will kind of shape the design of our system, and that will kind of give and take the pros and cons of what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. So if you think it's like, all right, I can set up an account. Well, what information do you have? A digital subscription might just take an email. Is it verified? Is it unverified? Well, how do I know this is Brian's email, not Brian plus one, Brian plus two, Brian plus three, definitely Brian plus one? And there's these variations that just make this opportunity at that part. And that goes all the way down from checkouts, if you have deposits and withdrawals, if you have chargebacks, returns, refunds, every part of the user's behavior and patterns, how you design those experiences ultimately say, hey, we're vulnerable here, or we're really, really annoying here. Go to someone else. At each one of those checkpoints, I'll just kind of write down, say, hey, at account opening, what are our issues? Fake accounts, bot attacks, synthetic identities, fake identities. Again, I'll go all the way through. Credit card testing, BIN testing, payment fraud, chargebacks, first party fraud, FTID, lost in transit claims. So you can kind of go through all of this. And then what I'm really kind of building out for myself is my own fraud typology for my business. Really, for me, this is my foundation for myself to really understand like I have a good snapshot, at least right now, to say where should I be prioritizing my time and my team's effort around the types of risks we're seeing, and do we have the right tools or data and signals in place in the first place to do my job well? So that's going to really be the foundational aspect of know your stuff. Know your audience is if I go to Vito versus Ryan versus my boss or my boss's boss, what do they know about me? Do they know I exist? Do they know anything about fraud? Do they know anything about account takeovers? Do they know anything about FTIDs? So like the more niche nuance of the problem, you really have to understand who you're talking to and what their goals are, how they're compensated, what do they care about, what their projects are. Am I going to be combative if I come with a problem, or how do I really find a way to align? Fraud isn't going to align every single time, but I'm going to do my best. And this is like a little bit of the research into like the individual of who I'm talking to. Why would they even care to have a conversation with me? I'm eating up their time. They got tons of things to do. You got to think about on their end, especially if you're going to an executive. They have a meeting after meeting after meeting after review, double booked on this, triple booked on this. They don't have the time to decompress until it's the weekend. And they don't always necessarily want to be thinking about fraud. So, how can I make it easy to partner with them? Then at that point, it just kind of becomes an equation. Know your stuff plus know your audience helps you kind of what's the delivery method of that problem. That's higher level. That's really kind of how I'm starting to think about it. Of like, I need to know what am I responsible for? If we had a fraud spike somewhere, how fast would it take me to know?
That starting point opens up a wormhole in my head, and that's what I call the 3-hour podcast mode, because I could really get deep here, but we're in that 45-minute podcast mode. So I know deep down right here, I know that that starting point has activated almonds for the audience right now. Is anyone in that starting point kind of saying, well, Brian, Vito, I was, you know, I'm going through it right now and I'm feeling a little bit like I'm ready to move. I kind of know my audience, but there's a certain person where I don't really know what to do. I know someone here has a question along those lines. I want to give the conversation opportunity to breathe. So please come on out with those questions. I'm going to take a sip of the old water bottle. And if not, I got questions of my own. So here we go. Well, this is the great time to quote Corrado Jr. Soprano, if those of you are familiar with Uncle June. And he told Tony, come heavy or don't come at all. Right. And I think he was referring to firearms there, but we're talking about ammunition in a much less violent manner here. Brian, we know our audience a little bit, right? And that's going to be different for everybody, obviously, right? Timothy Leary always talks about set and setting. That's for another podcast. But what we bring to the setting, and it depends on the set, where we're at, etc. Let's say, though, roughly speaking, generally speaking, I've identified that we have a tremendous vulnerability in logon, or in that initial account creation phase, right? I want to go talk to my product team about what's going on there. You brought up the word annoying. I don't want to be annoying, but I want to be effective and I want to be, attractive. What sort of ammunition do you think I should be bringing into that conversation? Just broadly speaking, I mean, if I tell them, look at all the weird stuff here, I'm clearly not in the ballpark. We're going to want to talk dollars and cents, I'd imagine. So how do you kind of formulate things? Is it the last 6 months, last 12 months, last 6 hours? Like, what is your thinking in terms of, okay, I need to go and get the numbers here. What are the numbers kind of roughly look like?
It's going to be different for each business. So the way, especially let's just stick with product. Usually product teams have different ways to rank and score their roadmap of what actually gets done, how much time, how many engineers it'll actually take. So I'm starting to now translate my own work into their world of like, how can it be easy to fit into their roadmap scoring, to prioritize we do need resources, doesn't need resources. So that's one layer to it. Another layer is what are their initiatives or projects that they're working on already? Are there big umbrella projects? Are there small sprints? Is there anywhere that this can kind of fit and align and support any of that? So even before the numbers, I'm kind of like aligning and figuring out where the plan is. That also goes on the assumption I don't really have a great working relationship with the PM, or I don't have like a direct counterpart PM, that I'm leading with those assumptions if I'm kind of like, I know who's on the product team, but I don't really work closely with them. If you work closely with them, it's going to be a little bit different in a conversation. It can be a little bit more friendly. It can be over Slack. It could be over a quick call. Hey, so here's what I'm seeing. And then in those situations, you could probably also ask them a little bit more of like, hey, I'm kind of putting together XYZ. I'm seeing traffic coming from here. And we're kind of loosely picking together the session uh, session history of these users of when they log in, they take over an account, they're going either to the update details to see if there's a card on file, or they're going straight to checkout and they're using the card on file. And you can kind of map through what is actually happening when an ATO happens. That's usually the hard part for like communicating. Well, what's the financial impact? That's why you see a lot of teams just stick around credit card testing, payment fraud, where it is a little bit more if this, then that financial impact. If someone logs in, you send a marketing campaign, you see all these users reignited and coming back that were dormant, but it ended up being from new locations and they're just kind of blending through the noise. How do you separate the signal from noise and build these clusters and segments? So from there, the purpose of all that is I'm really trying to align who I'm talking to, how their work is managed and scheduled. And then for myself, my own business case, especially if it's earlier, let's say I'm going on your example, fraud spiked today. I know we have a lot of weird traffic coming in from a region of the world. We have really no reason having this much traffic coming through. And we're seeing transactions come through that are maybe higher declines today, or we're seeing more transactions in a certain hour. I can start to have these little anomaly type behavior settings for myself to have visibility on of like, do we need to dig deeper on this? Is this good? Is this bad? And I'm asking these kind of simple questions. But from there, then I'm trying to lead, especially for ATOs. ATOs are sometimes hard. We don't want to put friction in place because we're going to turn away and insult good users. Well, it's not necessarily like, hey, I want to always put in an MFA. There's certain scenarios I might, and this segment is higher risk if they're coming from XYZ. Now I'm kind of putting together my like hypothesis of what the fraud attack looks like, and then what is the early estimates of the impact of that goes back to the session tracking of like, hey, the user logs in, they go straight to checkout. This cluster of users is leading to this many transactions at a higher decline rate, or transactions getting through, transactions at risk. Because if it's happening today, the chances are chargebacks aren't coming in. Chargebacks are a lagging indicator. They're your feedback. They're very important. But in that moment, you have to make some critical decisions if you really are kind of seeing a high pressure, high volume attack that your team might not be set up to handle and manage. So being able to work with the right teams to have levers, I could go down the entire route of like, you should have allies to have pre-negotiated levers, but that I think is a topic for another day.
For sure. And while we're saying all this, I want to underscore the fact that, and I'm not throwing, not throwing too many flowers here. I want to underscore the fact that it was you and your newsletter that got me thinking about the user experience. Cause I think for so many of us, we'll just take signals, and we'll just see signals from this weird geo at this kind of level of purchase amount. And that's where we're going to start building our rules out and then go from there. But I said the R word, rules, right? If I'm in the captain's chair here for the fraud team and I've got this going on, where do you think, or how do you think in terms of spending time? It's like, I see this going on right now. Do I take half the team to go deploy a rule for it? Do I let it marinate a little bit? We're talking about this lagging indicators. We don't know what we don't know. Do I take another part of the team to create a narrative around it that I can give to my cross-functional teams, the product team, et cetera? How do you kind of distribute your resources once that hammer drops? Are rules even on the table?
This again comes where I'll go down the pre-negotiated route. If you push me down the route, I'll go down the route. So if rules are on the table, what I like to try to have is I could call it a stoplight, but I added an extra colors that are on a stoplight, so I got to come up with something new. But really, if my volumes or ratios, so chargeback ratios, enumeration ratios, any of those types of ratios are in where I want, let's say green, then I'm not going to change anything. At that point, at green, for me personally, the businesses that I work in, I actually want to live more in yellow. So green, I might be looking at if we want to take on a little additional risk to capture some revenue and kind of flutter in our space. Ratios themselves can be very specific to your industry, what you really kind of are looking for, risk tolerances, type of products you're offering. So I'm not going to say ratios themselves kind of advise to any of the Visa, MasterCard, like card scheme ratios and making sure business tolerance wise, product wise, that you are in your right limits. Yellow for me would be like, hey, we're approaching a little bit of a riskier area, but I want to capture as much revenue as possible. I will buy data. So if you're collecting a little bit of fraud, you are buying data, paying for it, yes, from usually chargebacks or returns and refunds. Like they comes at a cost, but it gives you some sort of data feedback to say, hey, how can we build better systems? Next one, you could call it orange, you could call it red. We're starting to be in, we're raising a little bit too fast. This could come in with volumes to attack. It could come in for a chargeback spike of just, we saw a big wave, maybe beginning of the year. Well, like February, where December, January chargebacks roll in, some companies, seasonality, see February start to drop off, so your ratios are misaligned. That's where the pre-negotiating comes in. I'll usually have my stakeholders of like, who needs to know? What do we pre-negotiate? Are types of rules we could implement, changes of thresholds. If we have additional data points that we don't use unless we need to, then I don't have to go through my business case already. I've already walked through my plan of if our chargeback ratios are raised in this sense, then instead of going through the whole conversation, this is what we need to do, it is more, I need to tell people what I'm doing, wait for X amount of time that's agreed upon, and then I can make the rule changes. So I think about it more of there's two North Star metrics for me. Uh, how long it takes me to see a fraud spike. If we get hit by fraud, do I know right away? Do I know will it take a month? Well, what will it really take for me to understand? And then time to resolution. Fraud spike happens. How long does it take us to remediate and get back into the area that we want? So those are actually my two North Star metrics that really kind of gives me a sense of how are we performing? Are we missing fraud? Are we blind to fraud? How long does it take us? Does it take us from chargebacks and the attack happened 60 days ago? So that would be like my time to visibility and then time to resolution. Okay, how long from once we know can I solve this issue and put some controls in place there? So a lot of that then goes into the education aspect of who are my stakeholders, probably someone in product, someone in eng, maybe operations, customer support. If you work closely with them, if you work in a bigger company, you might have directors or VPs. If you work in a smaller company, it could be more of the C-suite. So it kind of depends on who's in close proximity to you and how many silos are within your company. Some companies have tons of silos. You're going to be working with a lot of different people there. Some companies are pretty flat and smaller companies, so it's very easy to navigate the internal politics there to say like who really does need to know, who just needs to know for optics, and who just needs to be heard, and how do I actually get what I need and protect our end users and protect our assets.
Breaking down those silos and getting past the fact that someone doesn't know my name seems to be a recurring theme on the Fraudcast, especially over the last month when we're talking about returns. Because I think as this industry has kind of woken up the sleeping giant of returns, we've realized, well, heck, there's all of these silos in silos and silos when it comes to tackling that issue. I think I think a lot about what Jamie, Justin, and Shelley have talked about over the last month, and I'm wondering if any of y'all or anybody else can either have any questions for Brian regarding your Sisyphean task of breaking these silos down or getting to a point where you can be kind of simpatico with the people you want to be simpatico with, or maybe you're at that stage of kind of getting to know each other and you feel it's a little bit cold, a little bit off. From anybody here, I would just love to hear your questions, your experiences, your horror stories, your success stories around this relationship building element that Brian just discussed. Again, pause for the water here.
I'll speak up. Sorry, guys. I don't have the answers, but I can definitely share what others have probably experienced, which is that it's tricky because fraud is not fun for most people, and it's a thorn in the side, and people don't really want to give that a lot of time. They like the fun stuff. They like giving product to celebrities and having sales go up and marketing initiatives and stuff like that. And so when you find a problem or a hole in the boat that's leaky and you're saying, hey, like, we either got to fix the hole or we're going to just continue to bail water out of the boat with buckets, and that's not going to be a good long-term solution. It's a tricky approach, but I like what's been mentioned about forming, I guess, forming ideas and issues into a context of dollars, potential dollars saved, stuff along those lines. Because especially once you go to finance and say, hey, we're burning through this amount, or this is a lot of money that we could get back on the table, back in our pockets, then it really starts to take shape and take form. And I don't know, it seems that people start to pay attention to it a little bit more.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's very common in a lot of it. Again, I think it's like who your audience is. Going to finance versus product. What do they really care about? What projects are they working on? How do they get paid? And then the layer above that is like, how are decisions made in your company? Are they made by processes? Are they made by titles? Does the COO have the best friend who works in the company who's a really random title that has no business kind of pulling strings behind the scene, but they get coffee every single day? That might be the person. So I think about mapping the power lines of how decisions are made. And then that kind of lays out what people I need as allies, what people that I need to understand how their decisions impact the risks that our company will now have to be okay with. And then it's more of like my duty in those conversations is a little bit more of like a internal consultant, where it's like, hey, here are the risks. You're kind of just now talking in facts back at everyone, laying out the landscape of like, here is what's at risk. Here is the current state. Here is a potential solution. Here's a couple other options. Or another option, as always, is just accept this. And at that time, you're kind of bringing multiple solutions and a strong recommendation that you would stand by without a doubt. And then you go down the decision route of like, how can I better support? And sometimes that conversation is not going to happen one time. Or it might say yes. And then that initiative is like, hey, Justin, are you okay if we kick this until next quarter? Because like, oh, we lost an engineer. This engineer went to this team. So those conversations are going to keep happening in order to get them through. But through all that, I'm building my paper trail, my own CYA, to say, hey, that business case is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We need now, like, here are the updated solutions, recommendations, remediations from it. Could be a rule change, could be a single data point. It could be one and a half people. It could be an AI agent. Like there's now lots of different options to ultimately kind of pursue and get the gauge of like who am I talking to? What do they care about? And then how do I actually build this business case of like what it actually costs us? And how do I get that data? Sometimes it's easier to get the data that you need to build a business case. Do I need someone from data science or data analytics or the ecom team to pull me something? Yes, I need them to be buddy buddy with me. No, can I pull it from and I can get 80% from the tooling that I have? Perfect. I can run and get 80% there and kind of gut check that to say, hey, this math is starting to kind of math. Like, are these solutions, we can't really operate in the current state anymore. Now, you're not really like the no person or like we can't do it this way. A lot of the legacy decisions, we've outgrown them. Here are some better ways, blah, 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 align with like big OKRs of the company. And then that way you're starting to kind of bucket up your work where you're not seen as a cost center necessarily. You'll still have to fight that. And you are kind of thinking a little bit more strategically of helping the business move forward versus, hey, we got a spike in cases. No one really cares about spiking cases. They really care about kind of the bigger levers there and what can you do.
I love that not being a no person element and bringing kind of, possibilities, potentialities to the table. I also got to say, I love the buying data element of chargebacks. I like that a lot. I think two people that come to mind, again, people who've definitely built I love the acronym, the KYS element to it, and also the CYA element. Probably, if I keep picking on you, is because I admire your work. I think Jamie and Shelley definitely have kind of taken the receipts to the top, and I'd love to hear just from anybody about what it was like taking those receipts to the top, not being a no person, and saying, "Look, here's just what's going on. I'm a little bit of your weatherman here, and this is the kind of storm coming in." Would love to hear your stories about that, but I also want to say hello to country music superstar Jordan Shamir, who has just entered the room. Jordan, we're all playing your song. If we don't know Jordan's song, you're gonna want to hear it on LinkedIn today. Howdy, my friend. Howdy.
Howdy, my friend.
So stories around building those receipts. Shelley, I see you're off mute. Would love to hear from you.
So I really like, Brian, you resonate with talking about the ROI. And recently I had I'm going to say another run in with somebody who doesn't like me within my company, which is impossible to think of. How could you not like me? And my ego that walks into the room. But she didn't listen to me. She was brand new to the company. I said, hey, you're part of this group I work with closely. I'd love to meet with you, say hi. And she's like 2 levels up from me, but I don't pay attention to titles. So it doesn't matter. And she's like, well, what's the point of this meeting? And I was like, to say hi, you're new to the company and we're going to probably work together. She's like, and her exact response was, I really don't have time for this. I don't think our paths will ever cross. It didn't sit well because 3 months later, I found an $84,000 loss that she ignored me on because I brought it to her attention. I said, hey, I need these safeguards put in place. I need rails. And she's like, but do we really? And I was like, yeah, we really do. And then I emailed her VP with the $84,000 loss. So she's really not my best friend right now. Anyway, so turns out I got those guardrails put up within 24 hours after that loss. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I bring up another concern, and this one will literally cost her $0. Each one of these, putting guardrails in, was just a click of a switch, and this is like a communication piece. And this is connected to a safety concern that isn't being followed within her department. I said, I need communication put out by this. This is a company policy and is directly related to safety of our members. You've got to do something. Well, what's the ROI? And I held my breath and not saying injured members and legal cases. No, is that not a good ROI? So to me, sometimes looking at it is saying, okay, everybody's worried about dollars and cents, but what if it doesn't cost dollars and cents? I need you to put a Slack message into a group and say, hey, we've updated a policy that we should follow because it's a company policy stated on our website. So I don't know, where does that ROI translate to the people who only think in dollars and cents?
Those are hard. People will be people, and not everyone's going to be your friend along the way, no matter what your role is. And that's not necessarily a fraud specific aspect of it. I won't say the story I'm about to tell will be best practice. Maybe not necessarily run with it, but I did have a exec who came to me and said, "Hey, we're turning off our fraud tool, and it's going to be we're expiring the contract by the end of the week." And what this is, and I think this speaks to you, Shelley, is it's the cost of invisibility when you're doing really good at your job. Any of the cost savings, what you've done, the customer experience, or changing of the rules that have recaptured 4.5% revenue within the last year. After you change the rule after a month or two, people stop crediting you to that, whether you keep talking about it or not. So there's this cost of invisibility that sometimes the hand has to get bit in order to get what you want. So I think about CYA, I think about paper trails, not just from an investigation perspective, but optics management. And unfortunately, that's the way that a lot of people operate within business. So within that, then I just went up the chain of command. I fortunately had relationships with the C-suite there and just said, hey, so and so, per our conversation, I definitely don't recommend expiring our contract and renewing it. XYZ, here's what it did, a little bit of stats, and then my little sign off would be like, hate to be the one to sign off on this. Right. So I might have a little bit of that personality and spunk that you have. I won't say do that. I'm actually say that's probably bad advice. But the point of that story is when you are really good at your job in fraud, it's hard for people to listen to you. So, and it's really easy to get caught in the day to day where you're just kind of chugging along, doing what you're supposed to do, and no one knows you exist. Your head's down. So, part of it is collect your wins, look at it. With my teams, we did 3 Ps. So, projects, plans, problems. One of the big aspects of that for me and my teams was we did that weekly. That replaced our one-on-ones. We just kind of talked about the problems, how I could unblock them. And then at the end of the year review, we had 52 weeks of all of these wins that we could categorize and put together for my team to say, hey, here's what we actually accomplished. And these little things that you forget about are written down there. So whatever method that works for you, collect your wins. And when things are silent and you feel invisible, but you feel good about your job, you have your win file to kind of go back on and really kind of make sure that you bring up appropriately in the right conversations so you don't get stuck in those types of conversations where you're doing such a good job that they want to cut your budget. And then that would be really bad for everyone.
Going back to Shelley's roadblock person, can you talk in terms of net promoter score and customer lifetime value? And then work with your customer service team. And if you're getting roadblock from this person, talk your customer service team into making it an item in the net promoter score that they can then attribute bad customer experience to this code. And then you have a record of this is the net promoter score impact of this. And then you have someone's attention.
Yeah, that's actually the language I'm starting to use now. I figured safety would be the biggest word to use, but apparently not. So then I flipped back to our MStat scores. I was like, this group is getting negative impact MStat scores because your group isn't doing its job. And I'm pointing it out to this group. So they're going to tell their executives. So we need to work together and all their MStat scores smushed together. So that's where I'm going next on that. Thanks.
I love this. It's like mildly Machiavellian. And that's that gets me like out of bed in the morning. A couple, yeah, please. That's the emoji for the day right there. Brian, I think and Brian Shelley Blaze amazing. I think one of the things that really was just touched on kind of answers Ben's point here. He says, that's the hard part. I want to be on the preventative side, but I always have to say, I told you so after the fact when we have lost 6 figures, then they rush to get what I need done. I think Brian's 3 Ps, like that kind of framework where you're kind of accumulating and acquiring win after win, week after week, allows you to just kind of pop in and do a quick little bit of addition or multiplication or whatever you have to do and say, well, here's our value and from a very kind of general standpoint, and our value is well beyond what you're talking about here. Therefore, kind of roadblock doesn't need to be there, right? And Tomas brings up another great point. Maybe we can speak to this, Brian. I would love it. Not just to this one, but also to Ben's as well. Tomas says, connected to know your audience. At the end of the day, I try to take my salesperson personality. Jamie was just talking about split personalities and the kind of need to do that. Many of us maybe have seen the show Severance, where perhaps there's a way of doing this biochemically, but wondering about the salesperson persona in fraud, and wondering also how that plays into the 3 Ps and how you pitch those wins after either 52 weeks or maybe 16 weeks or whatever. Would love to just get your thoughts on that. I know it's kind of buckshot.
A lot of people within the fraud space kind of have a similar type of personality of like, hey, I like solving problems. I want to keep my head down. I want to solve this. And that goes against sales and kind of like, hey, sales is icky. I don't want to do anything like that. But there's actually one key aspect within fraud professionals that is actually an advantage when it comes to sales. And it's the simple aspect of curiosity and asking, why did this happen? Why did this person do this? What are they thinking? And when you turn that around to the exec instead of being maybe sassy like me, and you talk with the exec and you get them talking, most of the time people just want to be heard, felt, seen. So if you can ask these same questions as you're going through this case, of being like, hey, Brian, why do you think that? Like, what am I missing here? Help me out here. Let me go a little bit deeper on that list. And then you get them talking, and then sales ratio is if you're in sales and you get the other person talking 80% of the time, you're doing a really good job. So you're not actually need to talk to be selling. You need to get them to communicate where the gap is and help educate them to close that gap. So that single aspect that sales feels weird and gross for most fraud professionals, we have one skill within our professional identity, which is a huge advantage of that. And it's just a curiosity aspect to ask questions. So when you're coming and thinking about that salesperson personality, it's less sales, it's more of that investigator personality of like, what are the right questions for me to ask to get the information I need to figure out why that exec doesn't understand what I'm doing.
I love that because my thesis for the last few years has always been that this is actually a journalistic imperative. Like this job is in many ways a journalist, and a journalist has to also tell the story. So we always say people love to hear the sound of their own name, but they really just love to be asked questions. I think that's where we're at in the 21st century. There's 1 minute left. I mean, please, without me saying, Brian, what is your big thought for the future? I'd love another question. I'd love the conversation. So please, if you got one thing to say to Brian Davis or to anybody here, please come off mute.
Hey, Vito. Yeah, no, great conversation. The one thing too, I think trying to convince kind of others in your organization about the importance of fraud is the whole VAMP stuff that you were talking about. That wasn't even on my radar. I don't know if anybody's gotten caught up with that and had problems with the Visa side of it, but from an ability to do business, it sounds like that's something to stay on top of, right?
Brian, what's your latest ear to the ground with the 4-letter word of VAMP? How are you feeling?
I think right now there's opportunity to capitalize on the confusion because there is pretty big business implications as a whole. So it gives you an opportunity to say, let's start have this conversation. Here's how it could impact us. It's unclear who's going to police it. It's unclear where it'll land when the dust settles. It's unclear. We're about halfway through the advisory period. If the advisory period will be extended or it won't. Will the ratios be expanded? What will be double counted? What won't be double counted? There's still lots of question marks, but it gives you an opportunity to start having that conversation to give people's ear, because on the side of this has huge business implications, you, Robert, have the opportunity to start having that conversation internally and getting people in to actually be like, hey, we're learning together. No one really actually has an understanding on this. Here are our partners. Here's who we're going to work with closer. We're going to work with our payment provider. If you do use Verify and Ethika, we're going to get a lot closer to them and see how they're thinking about it today. Do you use a chargeback automation tool or a chargeback prevention tool where you're able to actually say, hey, what is your guys' perspective? Right now, I'm leaning on my partners really hard. I'm on the vendor side, so we are having these conversations all the time with the people we work with. And look, we're all trying to figure it out. The only people that really there's a very small group that is able to be on the private Visa calls. Everything else is not being put out publicly. So you kind of just see it playing a game of telephone, which isn't the best way to learn. But that is an advantage right now because it is confusing, because there are business implications, and it's a regulation and policy that whatever side it lands on, your company is going to need to stick to it. So I'd use that as an opportunity to have these conversations.
The ultimate icebreaker. Who would have thought Vamp could have been that? Vamp brought us together. What if we talked to each other under the Vamp streetlight? You know. Anyway, I wish this was 3 hours long. There's so much to talk about here. I really want to thank you, Brian, for not only dropping so much great enthusiasm, inspiration, and knowledge on us, but for coming out at all. So thank you so much for being here. And a huge bit of gratitude for everybody here, whether you're a founding member of one of the buildings at Fraudcast University or you're here for the first time. I had a blast. I hope you did too. I wish all of you the most beautiful Wednesday and the rest of your weeks. You can find Brian pretty much anywhere where the internet lives. You can find me in fewer, but same kind of places. So get in touch with any of us, get in touch with the people on the call here. Let's make this conversation go on forever and ever, my friends. Until next week, it has been a blast, and I'll be seeing all of you soon. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your day.